Hi, I'm Laura Flanders of The Laura Flanders Show, where I interview the best thinkers and doers of our time. On TV, the show premieres Sundays at 11:30 Eastern on PBS World and at the Laura Flanders Show YouTube channel. You can join my guests and me every week there in the live viewing party, and then catch us all week on public television stations. Prefer to listen? Find us on a radio station near you or subscribe to the free podcast. You'll find listings and ways to subscribe at LauraFlanders.org. That's also where you'll receive my regular commentaries. I call them the F word. Here's this week's. As Hurricane Ida approached the Gulf Coast this August, exactly 16 years after Hurricane Katrina, all eyes were on New Orleans' new levee system. The city levees that failed so disastrously back then have been invested in and rebuilt since, part of a $14.5 billion federal government spend on storm protection that includes pumps and floodgates and drainage and a 1.5 mile long seawall. The levees didn't fail this time, and you could almost hear the sigh of relief, not to mention the salivating chops of contractors who are keen to get a piece of the $3.5 trillion infrastructure package currently being negotiated in the Senate. President Biden, among others, is calling for extensive public investment to lower emissions and combat the effects of climate change. But what sort of investment? Investment in what? MacArthur Genius Award-winning landscape designer Kate Orff believes that gray infrastructure like levees and floodgates and seawalls can only take us so far. The infrastructure we need, she says, is not gray, but green. She believes we have to do the opposite of pouring concrete. We have to depave and remove the mistakes that we've made in the built environment. Particularly, she says, we have to soften rather than further harden our shorelines. Meanwhile, on the Gulf, Colette Pichon-Battle of the Gulf Coast Center for Law and Policy points out that Ida's storm surge came nowhere close to Katrina's and traveled a very different path. The great seawalls that have been built did mitigate flooding in the city, but they weren't really tested, she says, and it was a different story outside the system. In Houma and Plaquemines Parish, for example, some people got as much as 8 feet of water into their homes, Battle told me this week for the show. While it might sound like the levees held or those seawalls worked, she says, it's of little consequence for the people who live outside those walls or who've lost their homes already. On Main Street in downtown Houma, storefronts were blown out and walls torn down. This was our Katrina. This was Houma's Katrina, one resident told WAFB News. So, if thousands of people can sustain devastating damage even when an expensive seawall system works perfectly, investing in more seawalls just may not be the answer, much as contractors' hearts may leap at the price tag. Orff insists that ecology itself is the infrastructure of the future. Her work with oysters and reeds and communities at risk restores and harnesses rather than resists natural systems to adapt to change, even as we work to mitigate it. You can find out more in our conversation this week on The Laura Flanders Show on public television across the U.S. and on radio, free and listener and viewer supported. You can also stream the premiere with us each week live on a Sunday or watch anytime on YouTube. Find out more at lauraflanders.org. For The Laura Flanders Show, I'm Laura. Thanks for listening.